from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I am Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about why is Indianapolis still in a public safety crisis after 8 years now of surging violence in the city. Welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode as we kind of talk a little bit about really what's going on in Indianapolis and why has Indianapolis experienced now really 10 years of surging violence. Since 2015, we've had almost 8 years now of the highest level of violence in the history of Indianapolis. And certainly like many other cities, we are seeing this trend where in urban settings, we are seeing a tremendous amount of violence and crime. And the crime certainly is impacting, the economic viability of many neighborhoods that struggle anyway, when it comes to getting businesses to come into those neighborhoods and helping to develop those neighborhoods, in the city. And when you look at the number of shootings and stabbings and murders and homicides, certainly it is concerning. And we have seen a tremendous surge in Indianapolis since going back to 2019, where we had 4 consecutive years under 100 murders in the city. And it's hard to believe, from 2009 to 2012, where the city of Indianapolis had 4 consecutive years under 100 murders, to see where we are now. The last 2 years, we have seen 200 plus homicides in the city. Last year in 2021, the city broke a homicide record. And this year, when you look at where we are, certainly we are approaching, for the 3rd year in a row, another 200 plus homicide year. And when we began to look at it, particularly right now, we have had 21 homicides in the first 21 days of October. We're now in the 21st day. We have already had 21 homicides. We're now at 186 or 187 homicides in the city. We have had about 790 people shot. We have had about 154, people stabbed. We're on pace now for 233 homicides. Certainly, if the homicide numbers continue at this pace, we're probably going to eclipse the 2020 number of 245 homicides if we don't slow down this current pace that we're seeing in October. So the question becomes, I think that has to be asked, well, what's going wrong in Indianapolis? And particularly, I have to give Mayor Hogsett credit. I think Mayor Hogsett has made a lot of investment in providing resources for frontline groups in the city in these hotspot areas, across Indianapolis, and particularly historically, to try to help address the root causes of the violence. The Mayor Hogsett administration has invested, at least for the next 3 years, $15 million to go toward frontline groups. So we got groups that do mentoring. Certainly we have groups that do reentry, that have received funds. We have community centers. We have anti-violence groups, grassroots organizations, you just name it. and even a lot of new groups and younger groups that have come forward with ideas as to how to curb the pattern of violence. So we see this large investment that has been made in the city, particularly, to try to help address the issue of violence. And the city itself is involved. It now has 50 violence interrupters, life coaches, and peacekeepers that, they have deployed across the city. So you have what the city's doing. You have the city now providing grants and resources for groups from the west side to the east side, the south side, and the north side of Indianapolis to try to help curb the pattern of violence. INPD, has also made a lot of investment over the last few years in trying to help curb the pattern of violence. You see a lot of investment that has been made. Now they have shot detector, equipment across the city, which helps the police respond in areas where we normally have a lot of shots fired. It helps speed up that response time by IMPD. We have certainly seen in 2022 a much higher clearance rate when it comes to particularly solving murders and in the city, what we used to call criminal homicides. I think it's certainly at about 50%. It's been lagging far behind that, and it looks like more and more, residents of Indianapolis, are coming forward and help to solve some of these murders in the city. So you have this large investment from the city. You have INPD, I think, is doing an exceptional job. And I've always said that in my 29 years of living here in Indianapolis, that I thought that the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department was one of the best police departments in the country. That has been my experience, both at the command staff and certainly with the rank and file. Now, anybody can nitpick, about what's wrong with the department, but a lot of times, we take isolated incidences and we try, to label the whole police department bad. But I think we have a good police department. I think the city has made tremendous investment in the area of fighting crime and violence in the city. And there are a lot more groups that are involved in being involved in addressing the issue of crime and violence. There's a lot more, I think, that are involved than maybe what we've seen 20 years ago. So all of that is good. So then the question becomes, if we're doing all of those things, why are we still seeing this high number of homicides in the city? We're still, have, I believe, a high number of robberies that are taking place, particularly with businesses in these hotspot areas in the city. I know the numbers say we're about 12 or 13% down, but I think the impact of that over the years has created this fear. And many of these businesses are really having a difficult time keeping employees to work at places like Family Dollar, the Dollar Tree, Dollar General store, and even your Walmarts and CVS's have experienced in certain areas of the city robberies. And I think it's that fear. And many of these businesses now are closing early. They're closing early because many employees are afraid to work at nighttime. They don't feel like there's enough security at these businesses to protect them. So they're closing early, or they're closing altogether. At 38th and College, the Dollar General store put up a sign this past Sunday, saying that they're going to be closing that business soon. So we're seeing that really across the city. So what is going wrong? What's wrong? What haven't we fixed? And in my years, being on the street. And as a pastor, I try to get out 2 or 3 nights a week with an organization that I'm a part of that is comprised of churches. Many of you know it as the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition. There are about 12 to 13 churches that help form this organization. And we wanted to respond, to the issue of violence, and particularly when it was happening in the neighborhoods around our churches. And we were already doing a lot of, initiatives in our churches, programs to try to help address what we believe were some of the social ills in our neighborhoods and, root causes of the violence in the city. And we were trying to do that, but then we expanded. We felt like we needed to do more. And that's how 10-Point got started, where clergy at first would walk in neighborhoods where their churches was located, and we would engage those who were most likely to be the victims and perpetrators of crime. And we wasn't out there to tell on people and send people to prison like, some people have insinuated that that's what we do. Or when you hear that Reverend Harrison wants to lock everybody up, that's not true, and that never has been true. But what we tried to do was to provide alternatives for people to a life that they was living that was leading them down the wrong path. And to say to them that there is another way, there is a better way, there is a way that you can begin to live in your purpose and your destiny in God, and that you don't have to, go down this path that's going to lead you either to prison or to the grave, as it led my brother to his grave at the age of 21, and my nephew to his grave at the age of 23 years old, and many family members and friends to prison. So one of the things that I believe is missing in all of this, and some of this is controversial in the Black community, but I believe in the Black community we have to have these kind of tough conversations about what's really going on. In 1979, Ebony Magazine did a publication entitled Black on Black Crime. And at the time, it was somewhat controversial, and they focused on kind of 3 areas. They focused on what were the causes of Black on Black crime, then what was the consequences, the economic impact? What impact was it having on the community, on families in these areas where we were experiencing a lot of violence? And then the third piece was, what was the cure, or what we call, what was the solutions to this? This has been going on really in urban cities since the 70s, and as we got into the crack epidemic and the formation of gangs and guns coming into the neighborhoods in the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s, we probably seen the highest level of violence that we have seen, particularly in communities of color, and breaking it down even more in Black neighborhoods across the country. And we have tried to respond to that. I do believe both our political leaders in the Black community, our religious leaders, and our community leaders have tried to respond to that. But one of the areas that I think Ebony Magazine focused on in 1979 as one of the cures was, they depicted as this way, having to address those individuals who were terrorizing Black neighborhoods. And they referred to them being soft on what they called back in those days hoodlums. Now certainly if we use that word today, it would certainly be controversial today. But those individuals who many of us now who do this work talk in terms of the repeat violent felons. And part of, I believe, what's missing in Indianapolis today is really what was happening in 2009 through 2012, when you saw low levels of criminal homicides in the city, where a city the size of Indianapolis, 800,000 to 1 million people in the metropolitan area, we were seeing about 90 to 99 homicides for 4 years. From 2000 to 2012, Indianapolis averaged about 96 murders a year. Some years it would be up, other years it would be down, but when you averaged it out, it was about 96 homicides a year. And I think what was happening, 3 things happened then. We had certainly the city engaged in it in the mayor's office, and mayors of both political parties were engaged in it. There were collaborative partnerships with law enforcement and all of these community groups in addressing the issue of violence. I think at one time Indianapolis was on the cutting edge and one of the leading cities, when it came to addressing urban violence in the city, because our numbers were so low. And at one time in Indianapolis, from that 2009 to 2012, several years, we had an 80% clearance rate when it came to murder, so that 8 out of 10 individuals who committed a murder were caught. And a lot of times they were caught within 72 hours because of this partnership between community, residents, and law enforcement. And the third piece that I do think is missing now is that collaborative partnership with the prosecutor's office, the courts, and probation in trying to help those who were arrested but who really wanted to change and turn their life around, but yet holding those who still, wanted to be gangsters and holding them accountable so that they were not arrested and then right back out on the street. And what a lot of people don't understand, if you live in the Black community and you understand the streets, sometimes when someone is arrested, the community or neighborhood expects for there to be some justice. And sometimes when there is no justice, then we begin to see what we call street justice. Now, one of my concerns, and I'm getting to this point now, is my concern is with the prosecutor, Prosecutor Mears. I'm very concerned. Now I'm hearing what his platform is really in, he's not going to prosecute women who decide to get an abortion. He's not going to prosecute doctors. He's not going, to prosecute those who are smoking marijuana, have been arrested for that. Well, I have no real issues with that. But what I do have an issue with is the fact that we have 21 homicides in 21 days. And I don't feel like the prosecutor is really talking about that particular issue and what's driving it. I'm out on the streets, like I said, 3 or 4 nights a week, and what I see is individuals with ankle bracelets, individuals who have been arrested for some violent crime tend to be right back out on the streets. And when they're right back out on the streets, they tend to do exactly what they did that got them in trouble in the first place. Now, I don't believe in mass incarceration. I do believe that the judicial system has been biased against Black Americans. I do believe that there has been inequity, injustice when it comes particularly to nonviolent crimes. And I'm not one that believes that we ought to be trying to lock everybody up who committed a nonviolent offense. I don't believe that that is the solution, and I believe that it creates other problems. But what I do believe is that we have to deal with those who are repeat violent felons. We have to deal with them differently who are not trying to do the right thing. We have all kind of groups in this city that are focused on every kind of area that you name it. We have tons of groups in the city that are focused on reentry and trying to help individuals who have gotten out of prison to be reintegrated back in society. They're working to expunge people's felonies off their records. You know, they are working to connect individuals to job and job opportunities. There are groups all over the city, from the east side to the west side to the north side to the south side. They're everywhere. You know, and I think it's an excuse for someone today, with all of the help and support that is out there, to not try to do better. I think that is your responsibility. But if you're not going to try to do better, and if you're just going to be a gangster and you're going to terrorize the neighborhood, then we got to deal with you differently. And we have too many shooters that are on the streets that get arrested and they're right back out on the street, that are shooting and victimizing other individuals and families in the community. When someone is killed, over 100 people are impacted by that particular act of violence. And we have too many families in the black community that have been victimized by this senseless violence. And I want to say that if we're going to really bring these numbers down, then we have to fix our broken judicial system when it comes to repeat violent felons of catch and release. We cannot continue to have these individuals arrested and then put right back out on the street. I'm a Democrat. I have been a Democrat since I was eligible to vote almost 44 years ago. I've been a Democrat. Normally 70, 80, 90% of the time during election, I'm voting for a Democratic candidate. There are times when I don't, when I think that there's another candidate that is better than the Democrat that may be running for that particular office. But here I find myself, when it comes to this prosecutor's race, I'm not hearing anything from my candidate, Prosecutor Ryan Mears, that makes me feel comfortable right now. I'm very concerned, and I'm not going to vote for him if he's not going to address the issue and the concern that is leading to the violence. People who live in these hotspot areas, and particularly communities of color, should not have to live in these neighborhoods that are being terrorized night after night. It's not always someone being shot or killed. It's not always someone being shot. But a lot of times, they are hearing gunshots that are being fired almost night after night. And a lot of times they're in neighborhoods where there are no businesses. In most areas in the urban core, we don't even have a grocery store because of the high level of crime that takes place in the neighborhood. So we got to drive out of our neighborhoods, and I live in the urban core. I didn't move out to the suburbs. I live in the hood. I live there. I pastor in the hood because I think it's important for me, amen, if I'm going to be a leader over this issue, to live where the people are living also, and to pastor where the people are living who are experiencing this high level of crime. To residents of Indianapolis, if we're going to turn this violence around, we have to really fix our broken judicial system. I think the city's doing a good job. I think they're making investments into the community and providing resources for groups and churches and grassroots organizations and community centers, you name it, to do the kind of work that's needed to try to redirect the lives of individuals and restore hope where there's hopelessness, so that people are not responding to their condition, which causes them to go out and commit a crime. But yet there are loving people who are making an investment in them to help our children, our youth, our young adults, and others to make right decisions in life and to get on the right path. But it's going to be difficult to reduce these homicide numbers, these shooting numbers, these stabbing numbers, if we're not also fixing the judicial system that is catching repeat violent felons and putting them right back on the streets. There have been too many women who have been killed over the last few years through domestic violence from husbands and boyfriends and ex-boyfriends who were arrested but put right back out on the street, and they ended up killing their wife, their ex-girlfriend, or a woman that they may have dated or liked that did not want to be bothered with them. A woman should not have to fear for her safety when she reports to law enforcement that her husband or ex is trying to harm her, and she ought to be protected by law enforcement, and we ought not to be arresting people, and they're automatically getting out on a low bond of $500 or no bond, and a lot of times they're not even going before the judge, so the judge can review their priors before they're released right back out into the city. That is wrong. And we have to fix that. So you asking me, well, what's wrong and why haven't the numbers gone down? They're not going to go down until we fix the broken judicial system in this city when it comes to repeat violent felons. We're not talking about locking up people who are nonviolent offenders. We're talking about little Charles, who was terrorizing 29th and MLK area. And little Charles has been arrested 15 times, and he continues to still try to be a gangster. He continues to still want to use violence as a means to intimidate and to terrorize people in the neighborhood. Well, if little Charles is not going to seek help where help is being available, and he continues to want to still be a gangster and intimidate folk, then we got to deal with little Charles. And we can't have little Charles on the street continually creating chaos and havoc and terrorism in neighborhoods that residents ought to be able to live in peaceful and calm neighborhoods. So my thing is to Indianapolis, when it comes to this prosecutor's race, we got to look at not what political party they are part of, but we have to look at what their agenda is and what their message is. It is wrong for anybody, and I say racist, to allow people who are known to be individuals that are creating chaos and havoc in our neighborhoods, and they have a track record of it and a record of doing so, for you to keep releasing them back in our neighborhoods, and the next night or 4 nights from that time, or a week from that time, or 2 weeks, we have to deal with another shooting or a homicide. It's wrong. So I'm saying to you, when it comes to this prosecutor's race, Ryan Mears, you have a couple weeks before the election to win my vote back. But you got to talk about this issue. I want to hear from you what you're going to do to address this problem of repeat violent felons that are being released back in the community. I want the judges to address it, because judges, you are also responsible for what's going on. You cannot keep allowing individuals who have a history of violence, who are trigger pullers, who have a history of harming others, to keep being arrested and arrested and arrested, but you keep putting them back on the streets. Indianapolis deserves better than this. We are a great city. We have great residents in this city, and our homicide numbers ought to be 100+ homicides less than what we are seeing today. We ought not to be at 200+ homicides every year. We ought not to be satisfied in Indianapolis with 200+ homicides a year. That cannot be the new norm. We need to get these numbers back to where they used to be, where we were between 90 and 120 and 30 homicides at the most in this city, where we had years where we had under 100 murders. That ought to be our goal. I know we can't stop all of it, but there is a lot that we can do. And if we're going to do that, I think the police are doing their job. I think the city's doing their job. I think the community is doing their job. We need the prosecutor and the courts to begin to do their job. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm starting to preach now. You know I'm a preacher, and I'm starting to preach about this, but I don't mean to preach about it. I'm really concerned about this, and I have been an advocate on the forefront of this. I have gotten my criticism, and I've had those in the black community that have criticized me. I don't care. I'm out there in the streets. I'm in the church on Saturdays when we're having to bury individuals. I'm one of those pastors that sometimes we have to raise money to pay for the funeral and the burial expenses, and we have to grieve these families. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of every year as a pastor having to deal with grieving families, that a lot of times the person that killed their loved one is not even caught and arrested for it. So they're dealing with the grief of the loss of a family member, a son or a daughter, a big brother or husband. And then they're having to deal with the fact that there is no closure because the suspect or person who killed their loved one is still walking the streets of Indianapolis. We can do better, Indy. We can do better. We can do better, and we must do better. And when this election comes up this November, let's hold both candidates who are running for prosecutor accountable. Don't vote for the Republican because she's a Republican or the Democrat because he's a Democrat. Let's listen to the issue, and are they addressing the issue that is affecting the urban core and particularly communities of color? And those of you who may live in the suburbs, you got to care enough about the violence in neighborhoods maybe that you don't live in so that all of Indianapolis is made better. Because if we don't address it in the urban core, it's coming to a neighborhood near you soon. This is Reverend Harrison, and thank you so much for listening today to Real Talk with Reverend Harrison. I don't try to sugarcoat it. I try to speak the truth. Thank you so much for joining me today on Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. And know that every week I'm going to bring you the issues and bring people in here to talk about those issues that affect us the most. Be sure to follow and subscribe to my podcast and share it on Facebook and Twitter. I pray that you have a blessed and you have an awesome day in the Lord. Thank you so much for joining me.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.